Welcome to Strength in Concrete, the podcast presented by the Post-Tensioning Institute, recognized as the leading authority in advancing the post-tensioning industry. Today, our host Tim Christle is joined by Gregg Freeby, Executive Director of the American Segmental Bridge Institute, ASBI, for an engaging conversation on post-tensioned concrete bridges of various types. This episode delves into why post-tensioned concrete bridges are an ideal solution for a variety of challenges, highlighting segmental, spliced girder, and other complex concrete structure technologies in modern bridge design and construction. Gregg shares insights from his time at the Texas Department of Transportation, discusses the durability and technological advancements of post-tension structures, and provides an inside look at why PT concrete segmental designs, like that used for New Harbor Bridge in Corpus Christi, Texas, are indicative of industry-leading achievements.
All right, so welcome everybody to our next episode in our podcast series. Today we are very happy to be able to have a discussion with Gregg Freeby, who's the Executive Director of the American Segmental Bridge Institute. Gregg is also a great ally with PTI for various other connections. Gregg and I have a connection with the National Concrete Bridge Council. I'm the current chair of NCBC, and Gregg is the immediate past chair of NCBC, and so have a great many opportunities to work with Gregg on different fronts, all related to the concrete bridge industry. And the great thing today was to bring here a discussion with Gregg to continue discussions about all the major advantages of post-tension concrete bridges, and then integrate, especially into this conversation, that deep connection between PTI and ASBI and all the various things that entails to kind of help, again, to further the discussion about concrete bridges in various different ways. So welcome to the podcast, Gregg.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity. It's certainly great to have opportunity to sit down and just kind of talk about segmental bridges and post-tensioning in general, and appreciate the introduction. And as you know, I joined ASBI in 2018. And prior to that, I spent almost 30 years at the Texas Department of Transportation. My last 7 years were as the director of the bridge division, or the state bridge engineer, as some people would call. And that then, through that career, certainly got a lot of exposure to post-tensioning, since the Texas Department of Transportation is a pretty heavy user of that system.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely great. Your background as one of the leading experts in the industry to begin with, and then, like you say, that diversified background of not only in the leading ASBI, but also with TxDOT and other, and design engineering capacities and things like that over the years. You've really kind of gone full circle, seeing all the different perspectives of this, and it's great to have that brought here today for this conversation. So with that, I kind of wanted to delve into leading off, maybe just, and I know this is a passion of all of ours and certainly a passion of yours, but just to kind of spotlight again ASBI's scope, their general scope. I mean, again, people think about with the name that it's segmental bridges, but there's been an expansion of that scope over the last couple of years, and touch on some of what ASBI's primary focus is in the concrete bridge world, and then also, how that affiliates with post-tensioning, and just kind of a broad overview of that to start off.
Okay, sure. So the American Segmental Bridge Institute, or as we shorten it, ASBI, was established in 1987. They held their first annual convention in 1988 and have held one every year since, including the COVID year where we did a virtual convention. But the Institute was really created to provide a venue for owners, designers, and contractors to collaborate to advance the segmental method. And like most technical institutes, we're sort of all about that knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, and continuous quality improvement. As you mentioned, we recently expanded our scope, and that scope increase includes the words complex concrete structures. And people are like, what in the world does that mean? And I always laughingly answer and say, well, it means what we need it to mean. And what I mean by that is, it's certainly not your typical, fairly simple, like an I-girder bridge. But when you start getting into complex structures, especially those that require specialty engineering during construction, That's kind of that role that ASBI's been able to fill for the segmental industry, and we felt like there were other parts of the bridge building world that could benefit from that, whether it's arches that are built incrementally or segmentally, match cast, precast columns, splice girders, those kinds of structures, and certainly structures that require post-tensioning, because that's sort of at the heart of segmental bridge technology. You can't build a segmental bridge without post-tensioning. And then as you start to extend sort of the post-tensioning into other structure types like splice girders and others, then post-tensioning becomes an important aspect as well. So I think the expanded scope, you won't necessarily see it showing up in terms of special committees by ASBI, but I think what you'll start seeing is more collaborations between ASBI and the Post-Tensioning Institute, and maybe even other National Concrete Bridge Council members like the Precast Prestressed Concrete Institute or Materials Institutes or whatever, just sort of identifying those problems or those challenges or those opportunities, and then what can we do to help with that. And that's sort of where I see ASBI's expanded scope going. ASBI and PTI already have a number of joint committees, the PTI M50 committee. There's a PTI ASBI DC40 on bridge design, and so there may be some other opportunities as we move forward. And again, just sort of identifying the opportunities of where does the industry need some help, and how can these technical institutes help provide that?
Right. No, that's an excellent point. And yeah, I've definitely appreciated firsthand our partnership on the committee side and various other endeavors that, of course, link over to NCBC. And really, it comes down to the realities of, if you're going to do a concrete bridge over these spans the way they are, that you need concrete, you need a reinforcement. Most cases on longer spans and things, you've got to have post-tensioning, and everyone has to work together, just like the actual engineering science proves out that those materials work together to actually create those structures that span those distances. So it's always a partnership in reality in many different ways, and it's been great accordingly. So just in regard to, and this also ties into some of the NCBC extending spans seminars we've been doing, and the whole idea of talking to DOTs, talking to bridge engineers, consultants, contractors about the idea of, people think about a bridge crossing a river or crossing in an interstate interchange. They think about various other situations. I know we just had a recent experience learning more about caps, or which there's lots of different terms people use for them, but some of these urban caps where you've got an existing, say, transportation corridor, and you put a lid over that with a structure, and it kind of connects parts of the city together in more of a, like, for example, here in Dallas, there's the park connecting downtown, the uptown to downtown kind of connection through Clyde Warren Park, and all those kind of evolutions that are happening there. But as far as just spanning over top of things and bridges in general, maybe espouse on some of the things segmental brings to the table as compared to your conventional bridge, and all the different applications we can do with post-tension segmental.
Okay. Well, and maybe I'll start with a little bit of a background history about the concrete segmental method in terms of its use in the United States. So this certainly predated my tenure at TxDOT, but in the late 60s, TxDOT, or what was then the Texas Highway Department, had a number of old swing bridges that crossed the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, and these were literally just little barges with cable systems connected to them to allow vehicles to cross across the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway. And those were expensive to maintain, 24/7 staffing, all of that goes along with it. And so they identified, like, we need to replace these with fixed span bridges if we can. It just makes more sense. But you need certainly a very durable solution. They approached the researchers at the University of Texas and kind of said, well, what do you have for us? What can we do? And they brought to Texas then the concrete segmental method that was being used in Europe but had not been used in the United States at all. And so The first then precast segmental bridge in the United States was the JFK Causeway on Park Road 22 in Corpus Christi. Um, Very modest spans by today's standards at 200 feet for the main span. But it really kicked off sort of a little bit of a building evolution. And while segmental bridges aren't used everywhere, they do provide a great solution for those waterway crossings and highway crossings that maybe have difficult construction challenges. And, after that first segmental bridge built in Corpus in 1973. There's been nearly 500 in the U.S. built since that time. And then if you fast forward to now, we're actually, as an industry, looking very forward to very soon a ribbon cutting on the new Harbor Bridge in Corpus Christi, which is a cable-stayed segmental bridge with a main span, I think it's 1,661 feet, something like that. And I've been told it's the longest precast segmental span ever constructed. But it's certainly post-tensioning makes that possible, right? That's at the heart of segmental construction. It's why it was brought to the U.S. in the first place, was because of the durability that we could get out of it. And it's kind of interesting, when the Harbor Bridge project was developed, it was done through a design build. And the selection, was, of course, cost was the major driver, always is, but durability was also a major consideration since you're in a marine environment that's pretty tough. It's the corrosiveness in that area is just amazing. But the design build team then targeted 170-year design life. I have no idea where they came up with 170 and why not 150, but 170 was their number, and that was certainly an eye catcher. And part of how they accomplished that certainly was through a concrete structure, but also post-tensioning, because a segmental structure is post-tensioned in both directions, longitudinally and, along the roadway, but also the transverse post-tensioning in the deck. And what really probably surprised the selection team was they proposed segmental not only for the main spans, but also for the approach spans, which were done using span-by-span segmental construction. So I know, speaking as the hat of previous owner at TxDOT, excited about what that project is bringing in terms of the long-term durability and, of course, the mobility that goes with a new facility that's wider and has a lot more traffic lanes and a better vertical curvatures and all that good stuff. But the durability was absolutely one of the big drivers of the project, since the deterioration of the original structure was one of the main reasons why it was getting replaced.
Right. And that's a good point you make about Corpus Christi. I mean, it's almost coincidentally become a showcase city, and the harbor there and everything, as far as the history of not only segmental but just technology and bridges in general. You've got the JFK Causeway, you've got the previous steel truss bridge there at the harbor, you've got this brand new Harbor Bridge, there's a great example of a lot of time that's gone by from the early 70s until now, and the evolution of things time over time, and how those advancements have really improved things progressively. So that's been a neat place. Most people who aren't part of this world may not have even heard about Corpus Christi in that regard, but that's where it's landed. So it's kind of neat to be able to see all that there if someone were to go and check it out. So,
right.
As far as, I mean, talking about evolution of things too, we recently, I know we had a showcase opportunity in North Carolina for the Laurel Fork Bridge, and again, for those thinking about post-tensioning and a segmental bridge, there's, basically the way I also try to do, this is like one of those things, if I'm at a party with my wife somewhere and we're talking to people about what I do, and I talk about nerdy stuff, and I try to make it simple for the person who doesn't understand all this. I kind of tell them to picture a cucumber that's in slices, and then you're basically bringing the cucumber back into its original shape by bringing all those slices together to form a full bridge. And when I've described that, I don't get into the detail of internal tendons, external tendons, and all that, but the Laurel Fork project is neat because, as you well know, with our showcase we had there recently, it's got a new technological element with unducted epoxy coated strand that are external tendons, and external in this sense, they're inside the box, inside the hollow box. I'll never forget another side story, my coming back from Switzerland last year, showing pictures of the bridges we looked at there and talking to my son about it and showing him us walking around inside the box. And he was like, wait a minute, that's hollow?
Right.
And he couldn't even fathom that it was hollow. Most people don't. I'm sure most people, especially when you see the movies where they have a earthquake or some tragedy and they show the bridge sliced in half and it's all pure concrete all the way throughout. It's just funny to see perspectives, but I digress. Getting back to the unducted ECS, touch on that because that's a really another progression that's really cool, aligned with durability, but aligned with strategies that help us, structurally post tension a bridge, but move forward with other ideas on how to do that. Oh.
That's a good point. And the epoxy coated strand has certainly been used in the U.S. for some cable stay bridges years ago. Some would argue today's epoxy coating isn't your grandfather's epoxy coating. They very much have improved the processes that they use to produce the material. Been used in Japan for, I think it's something like 3 decades. And so a lot of the, I'll say, growing pains that you might have in a way already been worked out. And it was great to see that done as a demonstration in the Laurel Fork Bridge, as you mentioned, on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and sort of a shout out to our partners at the Federal Highway Administration, who really do work with us to help advance technologies in providing not just financial assistance, but also, helping bring people together, whether they're the experts in the industry or other state DOTs, to, as you said, Tim, where we're able to do a showcase and get people actually on site, crawl inside the bridge and see the material in terms of how it was installed. And I think it certainly for segmental, the external unbonded post-tensioning represents sort of a next great move for the industry, because it provides not only the ability to directly inspect the tendons during service, but should something happen, then you have built into the bridge the opportunity to replace those tendons. So some people have likened it. It's like, well, it's kind of like changing the oil in your car. You have the opportunity to do it. Probably, don't necessarily have a maintenance schedule for replacing tendons. But again, if something goes wrong, there's certainly would be the opportunity to do that. So yeah, I think that's great that we're moving in that direction to adopt. And certainly I know there's a lot of work going on, again, at the Post-Tensioning Institute to develop specifications to cover that. So, I think it's a great move for the industry.
Right, and we like to put that in the right context because it's another tool in the tool belt. It's not that we're saying that previous strategies like grouting and flexible fillers and other types of, protection levels 1, 2, 3, all these things that have been talked about in other podcasts as well. But it's not as though we're saying those are being abandoned or shifted away from. It's just a matter of this emerging technology, whether it's electrically isolated tendons, anything in the replaceable tendon realm, the epoxy coated strand, the epoxy strand with fiber optics, all these things are just natural technological evolutions. And I think that they're all showing that for sure the concrete bridge industry isn't standing still and isn't sitting here resting on our laurels and saying, oh yeah, a bridge is a bridge is a bridge. It's all about the right applications and trying to move that forward. So
Right. Well, and I totally agree with your perspective of, tools in the toolbox, because there's never a silver bullet when it comes to bridges, right? They really are all different. When my wife and I were getting married, we had a little flower girl was a, friend of a friend kind of thing. And she asked her mother what I did. And she said, well, he's a bridge engineer. It's like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means he designs bridges. Why, mommy? They're all the same. And it's funny because it draws to that which you had mentioned about sort of the public's perspective about things, right? It's like
right.
On the outside, you might think bridges are all the same, but when you really get into it, you discover each one of them is solving a unique challenge. And sometimes, there's different solutions, different materials, and different approaches for each one, depending on
Right.
and that challenge. And again, that's where tools in the toolbox is a great way of looking at it.
Right, exactly. one other thing I want to touch on, because it's, it's come up in the past discussions, but now that we have the, direct connection here to ASBI, I wanted to kind of reaffirm the certification side of things. I know that, PTI certification for field personnel on multi-strand and PT bar and all that entails, plus the inspector certification, that's come up in previous discussions. And there's been a little of a tip of a hat to the ASBI grouting certification, but I do want to kind of expound upon what ASBI's offering in terms of grouting certification and the difference between the completion that I've done with that class versus someone who actually gets the full certified technician element. So maybe just highlight that for us if you don't mind, just because it's important, it's critical. Greg Krenskin and I talked about certification in general, and not only the field personnel, but other things that are focused on quality, durability, and I think it's really important. Again, this ties into the ASBI partnership with PTI as well. So
Yeah, and I think, it's great that, the industry has been working together to address, the quality of construction, and certainly through those training and certification opportunities, that's where that's at the heart of it. Um, the idea is certainly not that ASBI's grouting certification um, replaces PTI's training. It's meant to supplement. And in fact, if you dig into the M55 specifications and look at qualifications of personnel, you'll discover that the ASBI grouting certification is required of the foreman of a job crew. So to me, that sort of implies you're talking about the elevated, in terms of the staffing, right? Elevated qualifications that you need. And certainly, again, it's meant to supplement. In the perfect world, when we do these special request workshops that both PTI and ASBI do, we try to coordinate those so that the folks have the PTI training first, where you'll get sort of your first introduction to grouting, and then later the ASBI training, which is a full day, gives you a much more intensive, you get down into the weeds, if you will, of the material testing and some of the specification requirements. And then what you alluded to, there's certainly kind of a two-level thing with regard to ASBI. So there's the training certificate, which means you successfully completed the course, passed the end of course exam, but then you can go one step further and become a certified technician, and that is done by the first step, completing the course. And then the next step is submitting an affidavit of 3 years of experience in a 5-year period, which that period can be before or after having completed the course. And then that allows you to be that certified technician who, again, is required by the specifications. Personally, I like to see as many people complete the training as possible. To be honest, it was something I always dodged when I was a designer. What in the world do I need to go to this for? This is for field people. But once you take that training, you sort of have a realization that really anybody involved in a post-tension structure can have an impact on the quality of the finished product. And even designers, I think, benefit from understanding more about the expectations of grouted post-tensioning. So I've been encouraging pretty much anybody who's touching a post-tension structure really ought to be involved or participate in at least a training session of honestly both PTI's training and ASBI's training, because it just makes you much more well-rounded.
absolutely, yeah, amen to that. Because how tough is it to hold somebody accountable to expectations and expertise without even understanding what that even means as a LDP or owner or whatever. So yeah, we always agree to encourage those folks to get more involved in that and understand it and gain the education, because it pays dividends for sure. So I guess I want to kind of bring this to a little bit of a closure here, but anything else you might want to add to the conversation about, again, the major positives of post-tension concrete bridges, and then specifically, again, with linkage to ASBI and all that entails? Anything you want to kind of have any
I
parting
guess,
comments on?
yeah, I guess I just mentioned that, if a listener wants to dig deeper, they can go to the ASBI website and you can find our durability survey that we do about every 10 years. And it looks at the durability of segmental bridges, and it uses the inspection data that is collected by the states every year or submitted every year to Federal Highway. And we use that data set to look at how well are segmental bridges performing. It seems like, like most of the industry, we focus on sort of the failures because that's where we learn our lessons and learn what not to do. But sometimes we don't focus enough, I think, on what to do and what does work. And if you look at the ASBI Durability Survey, you'll find we're tracking a population of over 450 segmental bridges. Those are the ones that carry vehicular traffic. Doesn't include people movers and some of the ones on airports and but the highway structures that do get a good inspection every 2 years, they're performing really well. Like 99.5% of all segmental bridges are in good, fair to good condition. They're, and again, that first bridge built on Park Road 22, the JFK Causeway, recently went through a pretty intensive appraisal. They found some minor issues. They've been addressed through a little bit of a rehab project, but that bridge has already been in service over 50 years and probably easily go another 50 at this point.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's awesome. So, well, again, I appreciate your time today, Gregg, and having this chat, and always appreciate working side by side with you on various endeavors. And so I thank you for joining us for this podcast and sharing your perspectives.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us today on Strength in Concrete, brought to you by the Post-Tensioning Institute. We hope today's discussion provided you with valuable perspectives on the advancements and opportunities shaping our field. If you would like to deepen your knowledge or explore additional resources, we invite you to visit our website at www.post-tensioning.org. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Strength in Concrete on your favorite podcast platform and enable notifications so you never miss an update. Until next time, this is Strength in Concrete, your trusted source for post-tensioning expertise. We look forward to connecting with you next time.